So you're going to hear lots of sounds, and I'm going to ask you initially just to close your eyes and just let yourself hear the sounds. So see if you find yourself trying to figure out what the sounds are or being curious. And if you notice that, for now, just let the thinking mind go and just see if you can bring your attention to the sounds and just the sounds. It's not that the thoughts aren't going to be there, because they will, but just let yourself focus your awareness on sounds. Just letting the body relax. continuing to listen to sounds, but also being aware of liking or not liking, or feeling neutral toward the sounds that you hear. continue listening to the sounds. And while you're listening, notice your state of mind. Notice your thoughts. Notice your desires. Notice tension or ease, impatience or enjoyment, whatever's there. Just stay connected to what's happening in your mind as you listen. free to move your body in any way that will make it comfortable. That's another good sound.
I thought you swallowed it.
I should have burped. So I had this whole talk planned out, and then on the way over here tonight I had a totally different idea of something that I wanted to do, so I'm going to just go with that and see where it takes us. So it's only a few minutes actually, and then I'll still probably talk about what all that was about. But I want to first do a little bit of a survey. Okay? So it's going to be a blind study. Everybody's going to respond to the survey by raising their hand while their eyes are closed. Okay? So let me just set up, because I'm going to keep tally here. So let me just set that up. Okay. So, closing the eyes. I'm going to play each of the sounds that you'd heard. And with a show of hands, I want you to indicate if you find the sound pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay? You only get to respond to one of those three. Even though sometimes it may have been perceived one way and sometimes another way. That's a really interesting thing to notice. But for now, it's just going to be one shot and one vote. So, if you find that bell pleasant, raise your hand. If you find it unpleasant, raise your hand. If you find it neutral, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Thank you. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. 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 Okay, I need to recount, sorry. Pleasant. Thank you. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Sorry, unpleasant and neutral. Thank you. Pleasant. And unpleasant. And neutral. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Alright, I have a bit more count again. Sorry. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Okay, thank you. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Thank you. Pleasant. Unpleasant. Neutral. Okay, thank you. You can open your eyes. Cool, that was interesting for me because I got to see the answers. So, how many of those do you think were unanimous, one way or the other? Zero.
Yeah. So the baby crying, who liked it? You did.
It was.
My instinct was, oh, what a cute baby, I want to go stop it from crying. So, but I think I said either neutral or dislike.
Yeah. So, why do you think I had you do that?
Can I feel something there?
Yeah.
Some of the sounds are not unpleasant, but they were too loud.
So then they were unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
So the level of the sound can make it unpleasant.
Absolutely. Right? So, the reason why I wanted to just take a little survey, my computer's possessed, was because I wanted to make the point about what happens in our minds, right? So the topic of the evening is mindfulness in the mind. And before I go into the whole subject that I was going to talk about, I really wanted to make the point of how subjective everything is. That we think that we are happy because of what's going on outside of us. We think that when we see a beautiful sunset, that's why we're happy. And yet another person might see a beautiful sunset, what we consider a beautiful sunset, and it conjures memories of a time that was very sad. And every time they see a beautiful sunset, they cry and they're unhappy. Some people find the dog barking pleasant. Some people find it unpleasant. Some people find it neutral. So what makes us all have completely different perspectives on things that we all hear exactly the same, but interpret totally differently? So I like using sound because it's a really great metaphor for both what happens in our meditation and what happens in our life. So we meditated on sound for half an hour. My guess is that a lot of your experience during the various sounds was pretty similar to what you would experience if you just meditated quietly for half an hour. Sometimes things would come up that would be really unpleasant. Sometimes things would come up that would be kind of just neutral. And sometimes things would come up and you would like it. And it would feel kind of peaceful and you'd wish it would stay like that. But then before you know it, a dog is barking. So the sounds are really just a way to simulate the experiences that go on both in our minds when we meditate and when we're out in the world. And also all the stimuli that we have to endure as we go through life. Sometimes literally the horns honking and the dog barking and the birds chirping.
So it was really interesting. I noticed for me, when for almost the entire thing, I felt very peaceful and unaffected by almost everything, all of the sounds. But then I got an itch that was very, very, it was demanding attention, and I was trying really hard not to scratch it. And the more that it became intense, the more that I couldn't handle the sounds, and suddenly my reaction to the sounds became unpleasant, which I think is interesting because it's like I got overwhelmed and
Yep.
yeah.
It's a great observation. It's part of what I was doing where I was taking sounds that I thought were probably, for most people, pleasant or neutral, and I was laying them on top of unpleasant sounds. Just to give you the experience how, like, when there was a sound going on in the background that was kind of annoying, and then a sweet little bell was playing, did it sound sweet or did it sound like, oh my God, stop? You know? Because we can get overwhelmed by something that's unpleasant, and then it colors everything. And that's what happens in the mind. That once the mind is colored by pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, it's very hard to view anything else that's happening as otherwise. So even some of the bells that you might have liked when they were laying on top of some of the other sounds that were annoying may not have been so nice. I don't know, did anybody notice that? Yeah, so your example is perfect. Everything is great, even the not so pleasant sounds weren't affecting you, but the itch was driving you mad, and then all of a sudden irritability took over and you hated it all. Welcome to life. Exactly. You know? So, you know, when you're having a bad day, traffic feels unbearable. When you're having a great day, you're like, so nice outside. Look at that cute car. Yeah. So the first point that I wanted to make is really probably the main thing to understand in the practice of mindfulness, which is why we practice. And I would say that we practice to understand our minds. And the reason that we want to understand our minds is because our minds, and only our minds, determine if we're happy or not happy. Right? We had neutral sounds. Neutral meaning the sounds themselves were the same to everyone. Everybody heard the same sounds, but everybody here has a different mind. And therefore some people were pleased by some of the sounds while other people were not. Some people literally smiled when I played some sounds while others I saw cringing. Same sound. So our mind creates our reality. Our mind determines whether we're happy or whether we're miserable. And you may not like to hear that, because if you're miserable a lot, you don't want to feel like it's your fault. Well, guess what? It isn't. Because what is our mind anyway? Have we created our mind? Have we formed this set of conditions that have rendered us maybe averse to some sound and desirous of other sounds? Have we ourselves created that leaning? Could it be possible? Could you make yourself like something that you don't like? Can you make yourself not like something that you like? You think you can? Sometimes. But for the most part, how we show up and how we receive our experience comes from every single experience that we've had prior to that moment, conditioning that moment. How we receive this sound is based on whether we've ever heard a sound like that before, whether we've heard similar sounds like that, what was going on when we've heard those sounds, what do we associate it with, consciously or unconsciously. I noticed, for instance, some people preferred the higher sounds across the board and didn't prefer the lower bell tones. Why? Is it objectively nicer to have a higher bell? Of course not. So that person's mind, for whatever reason, interprets those higher sounds as pleasant. Other people, not so. So all the conditions and all the circumstances and all the things that we've been told, that we believe, all the things that we've felt, all the things that we've been taught, they all come together to inform the mind. And then the mind informs how we perceive the experience, and our perception makes it pleasant or unpleasant, and how we react to pleasant or unpleasant determines whether we're happy or not. I'm going to say that again. So all the conditions and experiences that we have lived with for our entire life up until this moment conditions our mind. The conditioning of our mind determines how we perceive the experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then how we respond to things that are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral determines whether we're happy or not. Does that make sense? So, let's say we all can agree and we get this. So then the question is, how does mindfulness come into play? So here's how I thought of it. I imagine that some being is sent down from outer space to visit planet Earth. And this being is assigned the task of figuring out what makes humans happy. So the being at first, it can take any form it wants. So at first it just becomes invisible. And it just explores and observes all the humans. And it notices some behaviors and some events with people being happy and others with people not being happy. So as it watches certain things going on, and some people are happy and some people are not happy, it realizes, okay, I'm getting nowhere. This is not enough information. So it decides to take the form of a human. And so it takes the form of a human, and when it does so, it becomes completely human. It has human thoughts, it has human emotions, it completely has the experience of being human. Okay? So then it starts to notice certain things make it happy. And then it starts to notice certain things make it not happy. Okay. But then it realizes, okay, that's not any different than what I was observing. Some things make me happy, some things make me not happy. Those same things make other people feel otherwise. That doesn't give me any information. And then it starts realizing that it has these things called thoughts. And it starts to watch the thoughts. And it notices that some thoughts make it happy and some thoughts make it not happy. Okay? And then it notices emotions, and some emotions make it happy and some emotions make it not happy. Okay. Still not really clear on how to become happy, though. So it kind of devises a system for itself, kind of like a computer program. Because it's an advanced being, it could do that. So it sets up a program within its system so that every time it encounters something that makes it happy, then it registers that that's something to repeat. And every time it encounters something that doesn't make it happy, it registers not to do that again. So systematically, as it goes through life, it starts to notice that certain things that it thinks are making it unhappy, and it automatically the data gets compiled, and it just doesn't do those things again. So every experience that it lives goes into this programming system, and the box gets checked, either to let it go or to do it some more. And slowly, the system refines itself and refines itself and refines itself, and it starts to notice categories of things so that it can become more efficient, right? Because if you only go each thing by each thing by each thing, and there's infinite things, so it's hard to learn what things to do and what things not to do. So it starts to automatically find categories of things. Like it notices every time it's kind, it's happy. All the things that it did that fall into this umbrella of being kind always make it happy. So now it knows every time kindness is there, happiness is there. So check the box inside, kindness, continue to be kind. It notices every time it's unkind, it's not happy. So all the things that it does, every single time it does various things that are unkind, it's not happy. So it starts to realize, oh, all these things have something in common. They're all unkind. Okay, take the whole category of unkind and eliminate it. I'm not going to do that. And slowly and slowly and slowly, it starts to become more and more and more happy. Every single experience that encounters that makes it unhappy, it never does again. Every thought it thinks that makes it unhappy, it never does again. Like the alien was noticing that at some point this whole mission that it was on felt really daunting and overwhelming. And every so often it would start to think, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do this. There's so many stuff. How am I going to figure out all this stuff? I'm going to be here forever. This is going to take eons and eons. I'm never going to know. I'm going to return home a total failure. And every time it had those thoughts, it would be unhappy. So it decided it would stop having those thoughts. But the system wasn't perfect. And sometimes those thoughts would come up anyway. But it already registered in its computer system, these thoughts don't make me happy. Reject these thoughts. So basically, the system said, these thoughts don't make me happy. We're not going to go there. But when they would come up anyway, that would be the default. It would just get ignored. It couldn't prevent those thoughts from coming up, but it was already in the box checked, nope. So it would come up and it would just not be anything. And it would notice that with other things too, especially things outside of itself. Like it would say, okay, don't encounter a mean, angry, barking dog. But then sometimes it would be walking down the street and it couldn't even tell that there was going to be a mean, angry, barking dog. And once again, it would encounter the mean, angry, barking dog. But it was in that category of, no, we don't want that. Ignore that. So when it would encounter that, it wouldn't be anything. It was in the reject category. So it was like a non-issue. So after years of this process, right, finally the boss up in planet whatever it is calls down to the thing and it says, it's time. You got to be able to know by now how a human being becomes happy. And the thing says, I'm close. I'm really close. I'm really happy, but I'm not happy all the time because there are still some things that I don't know, that I don't know to warn against. I don't know not to do. They're the first time I'm encountering it. So I still encounter things that make me unhappy. I can't possibly catalog an infinite array of experiences. I just can't do it. And the boss says, well, you have to tweak your program, figure something out about how to completely avoid the unhappy and just be happy. So it tweaks the program and it works on it, it works on it, works on it, works on it, and tries every configuration possible. And it finally realizes, I can't do it. It's not possible. I can do my best to learn the things that I'm in control of, that are making me unhappy, and not do them anymore. And I can do my best to see the things that I'm in control of that make me happy and keep doing those. But there are always going to be things I'm not in control of. So I can't always be happy. And once it realized that, the whole computer program shut down. Its work was finished. And the guy had found more than happiness. He had found peace. And he went back and he reported to his boss. And as reward for his great wisdom and understanding, he was allowed to continue to live back on earth as a peaceful being the rest of its life. So, this is why we practice mindfulness. That is our practice. That is all we're doing. We're scientists. We're explorers from outer space. We're looking at our minds and we're seeing how our minds make us happy and how our minds make us miserable. And through the repeated process of encountering the same thing over and over again, hitting your head against the wall 1,000 times before you realize, ow, that hurts. And the next time the habit is to hit your head against the wall, something kicks in and it says, wait, that hurts. Don't do it. And that habit is extinguished. And it's only the mind that can teach us this. Only by watching our mind and our mind's reactions to things can we see how we become happy and how we become miserable. Some things are more likely to make us unhappy. This is true. Some things are more likely to make us happy. But when you can practice enough to strengthen the mind and to develop understanding about the power of the mind to be at ease and at peace, regardless of whether there's happy or not happy, then whatever's happening around you doesn't matter. So it's like every day being in a good mood. It's not that, but it's like that. It's like what Allie was describing, how being bothered by the itch colored everything and made it miserable. So if you approach every moment from an understanding that it may be miserable and it may not be miserable, it may be beautiful and it may be ugly and it may be painful and it may be absolutely as pleasant as can be, and that's just the way it is, and you can get to a place where you just say, okay, that's how it is. And I don't have to have it always be pleasant or beautiful or happy or sweet. Then the mind is at peace. It's the constant feeling like things have to be great that make us miserable, because they won't be. When they're nice, the next thing you know, the sound that you don't like is coming. We can't hold on to the experiences we like, and when we try, we're just disappointed. And we can't get the experiences we want all the time, so we're disappointed. And we're often going to have experiences that are different than we wish them to be. That's just inevitable. And we're unhappy when that happens. But when we train the mind so that mindfulness just witnesses it all, as though we were an alien just taking data in. Oh, this is something that's making me unhappy right now. Okay, I can see that. Noted. Don't do that again. If we live our life like a scientist of our own minds, then we can perfect our own ability to move toward the happy and not repeat the unhappy, and to be at peace with the things that are going to be unhappy no matter what we do and no matter how hard we try. Right? It's like the 12-step saying. Learn to change the things you can, accept the things you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're looking at the things that we have control over and seeing whether they make us suffer or not, and repeating the ones that don't and letting go of the ones that do, and trying to find a certain way to be at peace with the things that we have no say over. So we watch the mind. We watch the mind. We watch the mind. So when you're practicing in meditation, or when you're moving through life and you're working on being mindful, what I encourage you to do is to not just be mindful of the things that you encounter, but be mindful of your own mind. When you're sitting in meditation and you're watching your breath, and you're mindful of a breath coming and going, rising and falling, there's a certain settling of the mind that happens. And so that's a really useful practice, just to watch the breath. But what happens when you're trying to watch the breath and the mind wanders away from the breath? If you're practicing just with the intention of watching the breath, when the mind wanders away from the breath, you bring the mind back to the breath. That's great. You're starting to train your mind to have focus, to have concentration, to have single-pointed awareness. That's useful. It's useful for the cultivation of mindfulness. But what happens if you're sitting in meditation and you're watching your breath and the mind wanders away from the breath? And instead of just bringing the mind right back to the breath, you notice your mental reaction to the fact that your mind has wandered. You notice your self-judgment. You notice, I can never do this. You notice perhaps the pleasantness of what your mind wandered into instead of the breath. You start to notice how the mind works around things. And then, sure, bring your mind back to the breath with the information that you've just gathered. When you watch your mind, you're constantly gathering information. You're noticing, okay, whenever I have a task and I falter from that task, I beat myself up. And then you feel when you beat yourself up, when you say that unkind thing to yourself, in an instant, in a split second, it just happens. You don't even know it. Before you know it, it's there. And then you notice how it makes you feel in your body. You notice that there's suffering involved. Just in that quick little comment like, I can't get this right. I'm a terrible meditator. Again and again and again and again, we feel into our own self-judgment. We feel into our judgment of others. We feel into our kindness. We feel into our generosity. We feel into our stinginess. We feel into all the things that we do because the mind is just going there by habit or because we're purposely cultivating those. And we see for ourselves how it feels. And whether you realize it or not, your mind is working like the computer program of that alien. Our minds are brilliant like that. On a conscious level, we have no idea what we're learning. But on an unconscious level, wisdom is being cultivated. On an unconscious level, we hit our head against the wall 1,000 times and we realize at some point this hurts. And on the 1,001st time, it's not our will that says don't hit the head against the wall. It's wisdom. Wisdom says no, don't do that again. That doesn't benefit you. And our mind has that power to do this on even the subtler things. It has the power to recognize when our thoughts make us unhappy, when our actions make us unhappy, when our speech makes us unhappy. We have to watch the mind and feel the mindsets and feel the emotions that result in the things that we do, and the things that we think, and the things that we say, so that that computer in our brain has a chance to register, okay, check this box, doesn't make me happy. Check this box, makes me happy. So what does that mean for going through life?
I think the challenge is when in the short term it makes you happy, but in the long term it makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
Like I have a bad habit of staying up too late to read.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the morning I'm exhausted and I have to get up.
Mm-hmm.
And you think maybe I get it together to like just force myself to go to bed early.
Right.
But
you can't force it.
I have the hardest time.
You can't force it.
The wisdom to like happen sooner.
Yeah.
So.
See, here's the thing about wisdom. You also can't make that happen. You have to be patient. Wisdom happens when it's ready. One of my teachers explained to me once something that finally made sense to me about this thing that you're describing, about why when you see that the next day you're exhausted, you continue to do the same bad habit again and again and again. And my teacher said that only when full understanding has been achieved does the bad habit go away. So there's something in that staying up late that you're not seeing. Something about it that some part of you thinks works for you.
Oh, yeah.
So until you can see through the illusion and see clearly everything that's at play and really see this is what's happening. This is why I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. This is what it's about. This is how I feel. And you have full understanding of it, it will go away. Wisdom can't be conflicted. Wisdom is pure. Wisdom is, okay, I see exactly how things are.
There's something spilling over here.
Ah,
Is that wax?
thank you. So, can you blow it out for me? Thank you. Yeah. So you can also have an intention to really get to understand yourself more deeply around this issue. Because you will never force it to be otherwise. Nothing changes by being beaten into change. It doesn't work that way. If anything, beating yourself into changing creates more resistance to changing. So the only way that something that you want to change is going to change is to bring attention to it. Not by hating it.
Right.
You're not bringing attention to it because you're mad at it and you want to fix it. You want to be curious about it, like this alien. I want to understand how the human mind works. So it should be a curiosity to you. I stay up reading late into the night every night, and in the morning I wake up exhausted, and yet I keep doing it again. That's odd. Why do I keep doing that? So without judgment, just really examine that. Notice how it feels at night when you're staying up late. What's happening? What's motivating that? Just be curious. Bring a really friendly kind of investigation to your experience and see what the mind can share with you. And when understanding is there, the mind will do what it needs to do to be happy, because that is the mind's natural inclination. And I know a lot of us, myself included, sometimes feel like my mind wants to make me miserable. Like, why do I keep doing things that make me miserable? It almost feels like I have a propensity toward misery. But that's just a habit. That's also not the natural state of the mind. The mind really wants to move in the direction of peace. So when it takes the data of what makes it happy, it doesn't purposely do the opposite. When it receives the data of what makes it unhappy, it doesn't purposely continue it unless there's a misunderstanding around it. So as long as we can understand fully what's motivating us, the mind will move us in the direction of greater happiness and greater peace. So just see if, as you go about your day, you can just add a layer of mindfulness to everything that you're doing. Washing your hands. How does that register in my mind? taking a shower, brushing your teeth, doing the dishes, eating your meals, walking to your car, driving your car, listening to music, watching television, going to sleep. Whatever it is that you do, there's always a component in your mind of liking, not liking, or neutral. And in response to that, there are emotions. In response to how we perceive things, in response to how we feel things, in response to how we understand things, we are going to find that we are driven toward or against or away or kind of checking out from all these things that we encounter. And we can get into deeper layers of understanding as we connect with how they feel in our body. Subtle little tensions can signal you that there's some sort of craving that's happening, some sort of holding on, some sort of wanting things to stay the way they are or wanting things to be a certain way. And another tension can signal you to the fact that you're resisting the experience. And you can start to feel, oh, resistance makes me unhappy. It's an unpleasant tension that disturbs my peace. And this craving tension, even though I'm craving something delightful or holding on to something delightful, that tension of feeling like, oh, I don't want it to go away, that's also making me unhappy. When we start to see this again and again and again and again, what starts to happen is we start to water down those tensions. They start to become less powerful. We start to be able to notice that, the candle can drip, and we could say, oh, the candle dripped. Okay. So? And the sound can be absolutely rapturous, and we can enjoy it without feeling like it needs to stay like that, and that our happiness is shattered if it switches to a barking dog. Because our mind is in control. It's not the sound, it's not the smell, it's not the sight, it's not the feel, it's not the taste, it's not the touch, it's not the thought. We experience all those things and we register them all as pleasant or unpleasant, and then what we choose to do with that determines whether we're happy or not. And that's where the mind comes in. That's what we need to watch. Just continuously, over and over again. Watching the mind. Cultivating the wisdom. Until someday we really do just start inclining toward the things that make us happy and away from the things that don't. And it works. It just does. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just practice and you'll see. You'll get the smallest little hint, perhaps, of seeing how it works. And it'll be enough to encourage you to keep practicing. Because the more you practice mindfulness, the more data you get, the more your brain and your mind and your heart automatically start to morph into the ways that foster peace. The more we let go of the habits that don't serve us, and the more we change and form new habits. Because just as all of the things that conditioned our mind to be a certain way was conditional, now we can condition them to be another way. The mind is malleable. Just because we spend a lifetime thinking one way about something and reacting one way to something doesn't mean it's fixed. We can change it. just by observing it over and over again until we learn enough that the mind says, oh, okay, this is how it is now.